Yo, morning guys. Welcome to day 2, Hack in the Box. Hey, it's really nice to see so many people here, man. Normally day 2 keynote, it's quite empty actually. So thanks so much for you guys to actually make the trip here in the morning. I know it was a bit rainy and wet and cold. So we've got a kind of a special iOS OS 10 panel discussion. Basically, it's been quite a while since we've been in Amsterdam, and we thought, since it's the last conference that we're doing here, what better time than now to bring back some of the, rock stars of Hack in the Box that have graced our stages and really, made an impact in the industry as well. And in 2012, the Jailbreak Dream Team, which are comprised of some members that are on the stage here, made the trip over to Amsterdam, and they presented this amazing talk. Look it up on the internet. There's lots of "please silence your phones." You look it up on the internet. They came down and they presented this amazing talk. So we're really happy to have some of them join us again. Unfortunately, Pod2G Cyril could not make the trip due to some family commitments. But we have a special guest who has joined us to replace the seat by Pod2G, and I'll let these guys introduce themselves. Maybe we can start with Nikias.
Yeah, hi. I'm Nikias. I was originally involved in the iOS jailbreaks for iOS 5 and 6 that we presented at the Hack in the Box conferences. And my mic is not working.
Don't worry about it. Just keep speaking. Yeah, that's good.
All right. So, and that's where basically my journey started. And right now I'm a security researcher at Zimperium and VP of product security. I'm leading the iOS research team at our company, and we are working on mobile threat detection for iOS and Android devices. And my part obviously is the iOS part. And also I'm a maintainer of the open source framework libimobile device that I've been maintaining since forever, basically. And that's me.
I'm David Wong. I used to have a cool hacker name called Planet Being. I was almost from the beginning. I was part of the so-called iPhone dev team. Worked on a lot of jailbreaks as well as baseband unlocks. I was part of the Dream Team with Nikias and Cyril, and we did Evasion 7. Later on, I joined a company called Corellium, and we did iOS virtualization. But, after we got our pants sued off by Apple, I decided to leave, and now I'm chief architect at Quantum Metric, which is not in security, but I'm still very interested and still kind of dabble in it as a hobby.
Right. Yes, I'm Linus. I mainly do the Fugu jailbreaks and iOS research. And
Small thing.
Yeah. What do I also do? Yeah, I'm also studying, technically. Not that much. But yes, it's mostly iOS research and finding all those cool bugs. Yeah.
I'm not sure what that sound is, but we shall not be too concerned.
Happily asked time to.
So I'm Joshua Hill, known as POSIX Ninja on the internet. I'm responsible for the green poison, and I helped out with the absinthe jailbreaks. I'm also part of the Dream Team with those two guys over there. Let's see. Lately, I've been playing around more with science, and currently unemployed, so if anyone here is hiring, please let me know.
Tajay?
Yeah, my name is Tarjay Mance. I've been doing iOS hacking since, iOS 5. Also presented at Hack in the Box back in 2012 on iOS 6. But me and David, we did do a presentation a bit later on the Secure Enclave processor, and I believe it was one of the first public research, security research on that coprocessor. I'm working at Azimuth Security. Azimuth Security, we do a lot of vulnerability research, and then now the new name is Trenchant, since the acquisition by L3 Harris. So that's me pretty much.
Cool. By the way, if anybody from the audience has a question, just raise your hand. Somebody from the back will bring a mic. Else, I'll come down and give you this mic, okay? So if you guys have a question, raise your hand. If you want to tweet us, because you don't want me to come with a mic to you, just use the hashtag #AskInTheBox. Hashtag #AskInTheBox, and I will ask the question here. Anyway, I guess something lightweight to kick things off, right? Like, it's been about 10 years since jailbreaks were a thing, right? Like in 2011, 2012, I used to jailbreak my phone all the time. And how relevant is it today? As in, how prevalent is jailbreaking, and what's the scene like? I don't know who wants to take it, but any of you guys are welcome to take it. I mean, I'm not really sure who's still actively involved in.
Well, it's probably just
Linus, yes.
So, what is it like today? Definitely got less. It's also mostly because every year there are new mitigations, and it's like you have to update everything. Everyone who writes those cool tweaks and stuff like that usually has to at least recompile them or even rewrite them each year. And that's why it's getting less and less. And also the rate at which jailbreaks are developed is like so much slower. For example, for iOS 15, it took a whole year for a semi-usable jailbreak to actually get out. And that's a long time because like everyone has to stay on lower versions, and then most people will just get tired and update at some point.
Yeah, I mean, like back when I first started, which was on iPhone, it wasn't even iOS, it was iPhone OS 1.1.2. And we only needed one bug. It was like a bug in the TIFF graphics processing library, and Safari was running as root. So once you had like exploit in TIFF, you had access to the complete system. But now you need to chain together probably at least 5 vulnerabilities to get anywhere. Yeah. We also used to try to maintain like a stable kind of base of jailbreaks of what functionality is allowed. Like we have like task for PID 0. We'd allow some level of being able to remap userland memory so it's like read-write executable. But that's been almost impossible. So I'm sure like tweak authors now need to do a lot of work.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like also the whole ecosystem is a bit like splitted. You just have, you have jailbreaks from different authors, and they're not compatible with each other directly. So tweak authors also have to make sure that every tweak works on one jailbreak and on the other one, and then on this version and on that version, and everywhere it's something different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, also, test. Yeah, also, I think what really changed is that the iOS itself changed a lot over the time. And also back in the days, there was just the jailbreak. There weren't like multiple ones. So basically, everyone was jailbreaking to give more functionality to the device. And nowadays, while you basically would still do it for that, but not everyone is doing it because Apple has included so many features over time that sometimes even come from the jailbreak community. Like they adopted changes into like, for example, I know like quick reply for iMessage, for example, and other things, that just made sense from the beginning, but it was only possible to have it once you jailbroke your device and installed a tweak. But now they have it, so it's not that appealing anymore to jailbreak your device because you already have so many more features now. And except maybe for the fun of it that you jailbreak it because you can, but that's not really like what the majority of people is doing. So I think that's also what changed a lot over the past years.
Yeah, I used to work for a company called IntelliBorn, and we would make the jailbreak tweaks, including Messages Plus, which actually did have that quick reply option. Mm-hmm. And now Apple has it built into the operating system.
So then the question is, who actually jailbreaks other than just for the, challenge of it? I mean, why would you jailbreak a device anyway then? You know what I mean? as a normal person, like what would you gain from jailbreaking that Apple hasn't already provided today? In fact, aren't you, making your device more vulnerable by staying on old software and waiting around for new jailbreak ETA when?
ETA when, yes.
It might just be it's a sense of control that you fully control your device, and like there's no one that basically you're in charge. I don't know.
So buy Android or something?
Yeah.
I don't think Android lets you, like Google doesn't let you really have that root access, anyway, so.
But like you pointed out, the primary motivator, I think in many cases was the challenge, the technical challenge. Like historically, Apple has been the device that has been on the forefront security-wise. So defeating that would be like a milestone for many, I think. So not just in order to create an ecosystem to provide tweaks, etc., but also as a means of, advancing security or, something like that, I guess.
Yeah, right. So speaking about mitigations, so when we did our presentations, we were like, this is probably the last time you can jailbreak your device because Apple will fix this and there's no way to patch it. And then every major iOS version, someone came up with some bug and was like, okay, I don't care about this mitigation. I have a workaround. It still works. And, every time you're like, oh my God, well, yes, it still works. It's amazing, right? But back in the days, so we did the iOS 7 was the last one we did, and we were already pretty convinced that it's getting harder and harder every time, and that was the message that we gave during our presentations. But surprisingly, you still, even the latest iOS version, people find bugs and exploit them. And I mean, you've maybe seen the talk on the spyware and malware threats recently, and their devices exploited in the wild, targeted sometimes specifically, sometimes it's more broad. But anyway, it's like there are still bugs, but in the end, of course, people write software and they make mistakes, so it's not that surprising if you think about it. But that Apple is going to fix it, and then they have new mitigations in place, and you're like, okay, so that doesn't work anymore because now they have this and that, and how are we going to bypass that? Well, unless they have like logical mistake in the mitigation or whatever. But that's very surprising to see. So it's definitely still a challenge, and since you can see that people are still able to bypass mitigations, the game is still not over yet. So.
I was just talking to Linus the other day in the speakers lounge, and I was like, "Are you worried that you're gonna run out of bugs?" And he's like, "No, I'll just find another one." Like he's not worried at all. So
yeah, I mean, talking about like nation states and stuff, how do you stay ahead? As in, from an end user standpoint, if you've been targeted, how would you know? Since you can't really hook into the lower level to see what's going on. Of course, the Imperium has a solution, but we're not going there. But generally speaking, what would your recommendation be for an end user, right? I mean, is there anything you can do to prevent it, or is there anything you can do to kind of stay safe, or are you just screwed basically?
Buy a new phone.
Well, I think the first most critical point is you need to be aware of the threats in terms of for example, phishing attacks. If you click something on an unwanted message, it's it might already be too late once you tapped on it. But then there are also zero-click exploits where you cannot do anything at all, and you don't even really notice unless the attacker is not careful enough, and then things are getting too noisy, and you notice something unusual happening on the device. But it's usually very subtle. Like if you think back at the iMessage exploit that Samuel Gross presented, for example, this attack would require the attacker to send multiple messages, and there's a daemon running in the background. So you have no visibility at all. It crashes multiple times, but you don't see it. Well, if you go to your system, analytics and whatever and check for crash logs, maybe you see it, but if you don't do that on a regular basis, you will never know. So there's practically no real visibility that that you have been attacked if it's something like a zero-click attack. Well, unless weird things start to happen, like your usual messaging apps start crashing or something, that might be an indicator, but that could also be just like a bug in the app itself and not necessarily an attack. So it's very hard to distinguish and very hard to see.
Anybody else have any advice?
I guess this is the side effect of having good security, is that the visibility is not, you're not able to have both basically by enforcing strict security. Because if you did provide a means of introspection or something, it could easily potentially be leveraged by an attacker as well. So it's sort of a trade-off you have to make. There's probably ways to get around it if you really wanted to, but like in terms of adding something that you could say do if you connected to USB or something. But yeah, it's always been the challenge, I think, for Apple to be able to provide some sort of visual feedback. But I guess they're trying to address that with lockdown mode and those kind of things. But for the average user, it's a bit difficult to tell. If your phone is hot, maybe that's an indicator. I don't know.
Yeah.
Damn, my phone is hot all the time, man.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions from the audience?
One more thing to add. So the thing is also that the mitigations that Apple added over time actually made it harder to detect things in terms of like from the device itself. Now it's broken again. And like you cannot list what process you have installed. You cannot list what apps you have installed, like from the device itself. You know, like very simple things that are just not possible anymore. They used to be accessible, but Apple like blocked access to these APIs at some point. So it's also that the mitigations kind of like reduce the visibility for the user. So they really need to come up with some better things to, if they want, but maybe they don't even want to do that because, you know, iOS is very secure. Which is not untrue, by the way, but yeah, we still know that there are bugs.
Everything has bugs.
Right.
Do you have any questions from the audience? Yeah.
So there's a question from the internet, actually. Apple is rumored to include app side loading in upcoming iOS to comply with EU regulations. Will app side loading have a net benefit or decrease safety for customers?
I mean, we're jailbreakers. We're always prefer that people have more control over the devices. I really don't ever see that as a negative for security. I've always been a strong proponent of letting people have control over what they can do with their device. I don't think that's necessarily. I don't think security necessarily has to be compromised because of that.
Yeah, right. Not by itself. I think also it depends on how Apple is enforcing. What rules they will apply, because just because they allow side loading doesn't mean that you have like full access. They will basically dictate the rules and say, okay, like this and that feature is not allowed, because they will most likely still apply some kind of notarization process that you cannot just install anything just by itself, but you have to go through some process to get it approved, more or less. And also, I think that they will probably implement it in a way that it's not enabled by default, but that the user specifically has to enable it. And then they will, print like big fat warnings saying like, if you do that, you will reduce your device security. They already do that with developer mode, which is kind of true, but at the same time, I think it's very exaggerated that they say, you reduce your device security. Because it was always the case when you enable, like, you could load like a developer disk image and have like some additional tools, but it doesn't mean that you can just jailbreak your device right away. So maybe you have more visibility into what's going on inside of the device from the host machine, but it's not really that the device is less secure. I mean, of course, it's more attack surface if you think about it, but yeah.
I mean, it reminds me of a story like, so there was one jail, because you can essentially do a bit of sideloading right now if you have an enterprise certificate, you can do signing. And then one of the jailbreaks, I think it was coming from China, had like it was enterprise signed. And I talked to one of those, the people who were behind this jailbreak, and I was like, where the heck did you get an enterprise signing certificate, to do it? And he's like, I got it from AliExpress. It was like Chinese. I was like, so I don't even think that, like, even at this point, if you're determined, like, a bad actor, you have the same thing. You have the same tools.
Yeah, there's actually a market for enterprise accounts, but I don't want to go into more details.
Please go into more details.
Yeah, well, so basically, if you know where, you can buy like the certificates and the signing keys, so it's definitely possible. So if you want, you can find it and you can use it, and then if you're lucky, you have some time period where you can use it until maybe the real owner finds out, and then, or maybe Apple, and then they revoke the certificates, and then it's basically game over. Yeah, because nowadays, well, if it's already installed, I think it only checks it like every reboot or something. But if you want to install it on previously when it hasn't been installed, you have to get it approved from Apple, and you need an internet connection to do that. So, yeah, and at that moment, they will know that the certificate is revoked.
AliExpress, everybody's Googling now about links.
I think Nikias had a good point about if it's not enabled by default, then it will probably be a much less impact than people would think. Because attackers would not easily be able to leverage it, because the greater number of people would not have it enabled anyway. So, compromising security, I don't think there will be a huge compromise if it's done in the proper way. But that remains to be seen, I guess.
Keyword being proper way.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, we already have that on macOS. Like if you want to install like non-App Store apps, you can still do it. It's just like by the rules of Apple, basically. And that's probably the same thing that we will see on iOS.
Yeah, it depends on whether or not they allow us to alter the entitlements of the program.
And that's where they have control, and that's what they will restrict. Like, you can still install your device outside and your app outside of your apps of the App Store on your device, but you cannot use like all the permissions. I mean, maybe would be interesting, but I highly doubt it.
That would be great.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it would be great. There will be no security implications with that whatsoever. Apple should definitely do it.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, it's Apple. They will make sure that 99% of people will not enable it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They make it really complex to enable it anyway. And then
it's probably like reboot 10 times, accept this prompt, enter your passcode 20 times.
Yeah, and if you don't flip over the device like this during reboot, it will not enable, right? So just make it a horrible user experience, because in the end, they don't really want it. It's like the U that is forcing them to do it. And but I kind of agree. I think by itself, it's not really a bad thing, because users get more control over the devices they kind of technically own, I guess. So, right?
Technically.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean,
do you really own it? You don't own it.
Yeah, if you cannot do what you want, like you already have to get it activated through Apple, so they really control it, and which is okay. But
you're renting it, man. You're renting it. You don't own it. Do you have any other questions from? Yep. We only got one mic, so I've got to come around.
Hi, thank you for the talk. It's very interesting. I have a question. It's a little bit complicated, but let's say that in the 1990s, where before there were already, everybody was online on phones and everything, everybody was using public infrastructure. like phone calls, right? So in that time, let's say a normal government, like a Western one, would have someone that is suspected of criminal activities. They could go with a court order to the phone provider and say, let me tap this guy's phone. I want to hear what he's doing. And I feel that right now at this time, this option is not actually possible anymore because all of the infrastructure is owned by private companies. So there is kind of an asymmetry for criminal activities that get very, very protected platforms out of the box. And they get like very, very hard for law enforcement to like get any information of them. And they gain way more than the private end user that like government doesn't really care about getting their information. So like, what do you think about this current situation as opposed to what it used to be?
Well, I think that there is we know that governments are able to tap these phones. They are able to do that by either asking the private companies, just as they always have been, for the information. And, and sometimes in cases, they have access to the ODAs. They can, in specific cases, they can like hack into the criminals' phones. They just have to be very judicious with the use of them. And I think that there's a difference between like putting in back doors and having mass surveillance, and also having the ability for governments to be able to, in specific cases, to be able to break the security that they're forced to use judiciously. Because if they use an ODA, it's burned. So I think that right now we are at this balance, and I think that it's working.
Any other questions from the floor since I'm walking around here now? Nobody? All right. Oh yeah, cool. Okay, cool. One second.
Hi. In the beginning, you mentioned that the iPhone or pretty much any OS from Apple is getting more shut down. Basically, more exploits getting forced of, how do you say it? Yeah, that's great indeed. Is there an expectation in the future that Apple will give end users more permission to adapt their phone to their liking, as in more security-related features?
So you mean like with adapt to what they want, like to change how the phone looks like, the interface, or what was that?
More security features. As in, most features are just like the things you find in the settings from Apple, but some root permissions, just to use jailbreak, for example, you need high permissions to change your phone.
I don't expect that will happen. Like the side loading step where you can install your own applications, like that would be a huge step for Apple already. But being able to like just out of the box jailbreak your phone is something that will definitely not happen. Like,
yeah, totally agree. That's not going to happen. And we know the guys from Apple, so.
I mean, it is happening when the EU decides that they have to do that, but
yeah.
Hi. It's difficult to explain this. Jailbreaks usually are, most of the times, correct me if I'm wrong, but are closed source. You don't have access to a source code. And I see personally that as a problem, because basically you're asking a user to trust somebody else to get root access on their device, install, change every setting, and trusting this guy. You don't even know his name. There is not a company behind. Because it is most of the times, let's say that the executable you launch to jailbreak your device is closed source. Second point is that being closed source, other researchers or guys, young students that maybe have time to invest in this, they don't have access to that knowledge. They cannot learn. So do you see it as a problem, or you are a strong believer that should be closed source? What is your opinion?
I think it kind of depends. If you think back at our days when we did the jailbreaks, we kind of thought, okay, so, if you just put the source code out there, Apple can just fix it right away. But regardless of that, I mean, even if you obfuscate it and whatever, they still figure out what you did, because they have all the tools and they can, use their special devices and get like kernel debugging and whatever. So they will find out regardless. Maybe it just takes them a day longer or something, but they say, they literally said to us, it doesn't matter what you do. Like, you can just, we will still find out, right? So don't even waste time on that, right? And I think there was some competition also sometimes where you just said, okay, if we, open source it, then others will just use it and adapt it.
And sell it. There was a lot of, there was a lot of that kind of that exploitative stuff early on in the early days of jailbreaking. And we were afraid that our stuff will be packaged into malware and things like that. It didn't turn out to be as big of a deal as it did, but we definitely kept things close to our chest. And I know that Tarjay and Linus, when they were first starting, there was no information about jailbreaking. And that's really, it was obviously made it difficult for them to start up, but it was sort of a deliberate choice on our part. We wanted to be, what we were trying to achieve, and it may have been misguided at the time, was we were trying to be the stewards of keeping the phone jailbreakable for as open and free to jailbreak as long as possible. But, yeah.
We were actually very careful with how we did it, because, for example, for the 5.1 jailbreak, we used the same bug that we had in 5.0, but we had to use a different binary. So we basically took the old one from the device and patched it. We took the current one and patched it so it would have the same bug as the old one. And that was
the raccoon,
because we didn't want to put the original binary in the jailbreak tool, because that would be a
copyright violation.
Right?
So we were trying hard to I don't know.
And we didn't know what Apple would do, but nowadays everything's just developer just image packed into the jailbreak tool. Nobody cares.
Let's get a enterprise signing certificate from AliExpress.
The iOS 7 one, we used Apple's app and then repackaged it or something. You downloaded it from the store and then.
Oh yes.
Yeah, because we also didn't want to package it, right?
Gentlemen hackers. That's pretty much what it is, man. Anybody else got any questions from the floor? Yeah.
Talking about jailbreaks, a lot of private security research, public security research, malware research, or forensic research is being done on jailbreaks. And as Apple is doubling down on jailbreaks and making it harder and harder, and we just heard the iOS 15 jailbreak took nearly a year until something came out, aren't they actually hurting themselves because they're making security research so much harder and finding new bugs and giving private companies who are doing it and not publicizing their research a more advantage?
Absolutely.
Answer is yes. Anybody else? We've got 10 minutes, so if you've got a question.
What was, maybe this is the question to each of you, what was the initial reason why you started jailbreaking? Was it missing some features, or I can do it better than Apple, or was it out of curiosity, can I do it, or what was that for you personally? And maybe second question, does Apple contacted you and ask you to join their team? And if yes, why didn't you accept this offer? Thanks.
Okay. So personally, it was, I guess, a mix, because the system was new. It was a new style of device and operating system on the market. And, but then also it was curiosity. In my case, the first device I got, it was carrier locked. So I had to jailbreak it so I can use it on a different carrier. So that was the first reason why I was using a jailbreak. But that got me interested, wow, this is so new, and what can I do with it? And maybe you can do so much more things with it, right? And then, started to look around, and then people reached out because I was already. So I was a Linux user back at that time, and I didn't. There's no iTunes for Linux, so I started to figure out how to use it. And then there was this project. It was called libiphone, which was later renamed to libimobile device, and that's how I kind of got involved into iOS kind of, iPhone OS, which how it was called back in the days. And and that kind of happened that I was contacted by the Green Poison team to kind of help work on the jailbreak tool. And then it got more and more, and you get involved more and more, and you find bugs by implementing just one of these services, for example, and you're like, okay, I can write files to any location if I want to. It's really great, and things like that that you stumble upon on the way. So
Go ahead.
Okay. So I was a really poor college student. I couldn't afford an iPhone. I got an iPod Touch instead. I had the expectation that I would be able to install Skype or something like that on it. Eventually, they kind of sold it to me as a full functional computer, basically. Turns out you can't. You have to pay $6 to get the Notes app on it too at that point. But I was really excited to get the jailbreak for it. But then it didn't come for a long time, so I decided to help out. So that was how I started. What was the second part of your question? Was that? Oh yes.
All right. Yeah. They were reaching out. Actually, they reached out after the first presentation we gave, and and things just evolved over time. So I didn't. I was just thinking that in some other private company, you can, make a lot more money. So I don't know. It just felt like it's interesting to work there for sure. But I think there are better options available. And back at the time, it would definitely involve relocation. And, if you have family and stuff, it's a tough decision, and, multiple factors actually.
Yeah, in terms of Apple contacting me, it's more like I have contacts with individual Apple employees, and I think they did want me to apply for and try to get a job there. But when that became a serious option for me, I actually wanted to go start Corellium. So that was one reason I didn't. But it's kind of funny, we were talking about being closed source, but we were working on a jailbreak, and then I was in an IRC chat room with some of the Apple employees who are supposed to be seeing what we did. And then they would be working all night. We would be working all night, working on a jailbreak, and then we'd sleep, and then they'd be working all night reversing it. So, and then it was cool because one time he came back to me and he was like, "Oh, this is amazeballs," and I was like, "Thank you." So,
Linus?
Yeah, for me, so how I got into jailbreaking is I was mainly doing macOS research. And then at some point I just got bored because macOS it just was too easy. And iOS has way more mitigations. And that's how I started looking into iOS. And I started with the original Fugu, which was checkmate based on the bootrom exploit that was released at that time. And I just made it into a functional jailbreak. And then afterwards I decided, why not do a real jailbreak with my own vulnerabilities? And
And has Apple contacted you?
Yes. They implied some stuff. I know that they probably want me to work for them, but I did not receive an offer from them, so I'm still waiting.
Hint.
So if anyone from Apple is here,
that's
sign
usually
contract.
not how it works. You have to officially apply. Even if
but the thing is, I don't want to apply.
Just saying.
You should not need to apply, I think. Josh?
I was just trying to forget about my life. So just concentrating on something else. That's kind of how it started. And then I saw Planet Beans iPhone Linux project, and that was awesome. So that's how I really got into it. And yeah, I've talked to Apple plenty.
Never wanted to work there though?
I applied to like 10 positions like last month, but I have not heard anything. They haven't said no yet. But
Wrong positions.
no. Probably ghost jobs.
Stuck in a spam filter somewhere. Tajay?
Yeah, so I came from a Windows background. And what I noticed was that embedded systems was becoming more popular and more mainstream. And they were really pushing hard on security. So I found that as an opportunity to try something new. And I was particularly motivated by the fact that they were constantly trying to innovate on the security side of things. So they were pretty early in adding mandatory code signing to iOS. So just that was like a huge difference from Windows. So yeah, it's just snowballed from there, I guess. And every year it's like there's another challenge, there's another mitigation, there's another hardware feature that you can look at. So it never gets boring, pretty much, in my opinion.
I have a question for you and Linus. Did you have an iPhone before you started on that when you were working on Windows?
I did actually, yeah. But yeah, I was pretty focused on Windows stuff at the time. But yeah, it was definitely like something I always thought about. Like my main issue was, like, as I mentioned and as you pointed out, was the lack of public knowledge at the time. So the barrier to get into the field was pretty steep, and you sort of had to figure out a lot of stuff on your own. Whereas today, there's as pointed out here, like there's a limited knowledge about the current state, but there's still a lot of open source jailbreaks available that you can look at, which will basically have a lot of information about the things you need to look at to get up to speed, I guess.
We have like 4 minutes. One more question. That's the max question.
I have a question. When are we going to see the Evasion 7 and 8 source code?
No. No, there's no Evasion 8. Evasion 7 could happen at some point.
Yeah, if I find it from my backups, I'll put it.
I have it.
You have it?
Yeah,
okay,
but
great.
The repository is a mess. It's like split across like two, like, I don't know. It's weird.
When do we want people to see our dirty laundry, huh? Like,
yeah. Right.
I remember doing a presentation on Evasion 7. And I think the kernel exploit was based on some techniques that Mark and I presented at Hack in the Box.
Yes.
And it was kind of funny because I remember when Mark and I were preparing that presentation, Mark was like, I don't think we have enough slides. So he was starting to, I think a couple of days before he was trying to come up with some additional slides, and then, I have this like technique I can put in. And then I remember thinking for myself, like, no one is ever going to use these techniques. And it's kind of funny that like the next major jailbreak, David just like used pretty much every single technique that we put in.
I was taking notes. I was like, this is great stuff. Like I thought it was brilliant. So I definitely used all of this stuff.
Yeah. It was fun.
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of following like kernel exploits were based on that knowledge. Yeah.
Cool, guys. So thank you guys so much for joining us today. I think it's been a fantastic panel. I'm really in awe that, of all of the stuff that you guys have done and the amount of, research that has, and contributions basically that each of you have contributed to moving the state of security forward. So you guys can join me in just giving them a big hand because they've actually set the industry.